Hello, and thank you for joining us for this very special Street Smart edition of the Sydenham Arts Podcast, where we talk all things Sydenham, Lewisham and beyond. I'm your host, Angela Eyton, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about women's safety. What are the issues? What role does the arts have to play in all of this? And what can we do as a community to help? In the podcast, there may be some topics that viewers and listeners may find uncomfortable. Some interviews contain material of a highly sensitive nature, including sexual violence towards women, that may be triggering for some individuals. All opinions are hosts' and guests' own and do not reflect those of Sydenham Arts. Speaking of guests, we have three excellent guests lined up for you. We've got local artist Henna Bakhshi, our local Labour MP for Lewisham West and Penge, Ellie Reeves, and local business owner Jack Duddy, who runs Leo Cafe. First up, I'm chatting with local artist Henna Bakhshi. We're going to be talking about art for change and the role that art can play in tackling social issues. She believes art has the power to change hearts and minds. Hello, Henna. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. I'm really happy to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. We're excited to be talking to you about your art and your work and being a Sydenham local, really. So first of all, could you tell us a bit about you and your art? What inspires you to come up with new ideas for work, things like that. And it'd be really great to hear about how your work touches on issues of women's equality and empowerment.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I am an artist. I'm a completely self-taught artist. So I loved art as a kid, but my mum and dad and entire extended family were convinced I was going to be a lawyer or a doctor. So I kind of forgot about art for a really long time until, very fortunate timing, just before lockdown, I rediscovered painting again and I ordered a paint set. And then when lockdown happened, I just had loads of time. I think we all did, which I just never had before. And I just started painting and I haven't stopped since. And I actually started off doing painting tutorials because it had just been such a long time since I've been painting. But as time went on, and I think lots of things happened that year. There was obviously lockdown. There was also the death of George Floyd as well, which I think hit a lot of people really hard. It just inspired a completely new way of painting, which is what I call art for change or art for healing. And it's inspired by my experiences growing up as a second generation immigrant, but also any issues of social change around the world. And I think that's where I get my inspiration from. So if I'm watching the news or I'm on Facebook or I'm speaking to somebody and I hear a story or something that normally I think, oh, that's really unfair, or, oh, I didn't know about that. That's where I get the inspiration to paint, to just raise awareness. And I think also, if I'm being honest, to process my own feelings around it as well. And in terms of women inequality, do you know what? I think it's really interesting that it's always easier to advocate on behalf of others. And I think for me, the change came when I had my two daughters. And it really made me reflect on how I had been brought up and what was normal at that time. And just made me really, really super determined to make things different for them. I feel like a lot of my paintings, all of those different things feed into it. It's my cultural background, how I was brought up, but also the determination to make it different for this next generation.
That's great. That's great. Do you think that you see that difference coming through with your daughters? I don't know how old they are, or maybe it's too early to tell. Do you see a difference for them and around them?
Yes, very much so, which is what gives me hope. So they are 9 and 7. And I think it's a combination of, it's not just me, right? I feel like there are a lot of women of my generation, and actually, I think the next generation down, I don't even know what they are. They're millennials or I don't know, they're Gen Z or what they are, but I feel like there are a lot of young women who feel very empowered to use their voice and to make a difference, and who are having conversations that we've just never had before. And that's the first step, right? Is just talking about it and bringing it into the public domain and speaking to men about all these issues as well. So I think it's very different. I think my daughters are being brought up by myself as a woman in a very different situation to what my mum was, culturally and in all sorts of different ways. And I think also their generation, the boys are being brought up differently. And I know this might be a little bit naive because they're still very young, like they've not hit puberty yet, the hormones and stuff haven't come in. They're still kind of, very innocent, lovely children. But I also feel like the boys are being brought up differently. They're being brought up to know that it's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to talk about things. It's, girls can do anything boys can do. So as dire as I think it feels, sometimes I have a lot of hope for the future, definitely.
That's great. That is really good. And so it sounds like you take a lot of inspiration from stories around you. Are there any particular artists that also inspire your work or that you've taken inspiration from?
I think in terms of my painting style, probably not. But I think in terms of the difference that I think art can make, I love Bakhshi. I think he is amazing. I think his work is really indicative of how you can just see a piece of art and it can capture a really complex conversation in just one visual piece. I think that's brilliant. I think the fact that nobody knows who he is obviously adds to the whole intrigue, and it's all very exciting. I went to his exhibition actually in Covent Garden and it was just brilliant. It was really, really brilliant. I love Frida Kahlo. I love her bold use of colours. But I think in terms of artists, to be honest, I don't even know if I could name any of them, but I think there are a lot of really cool artists on social media and they're a lot smaller. And I probably couldn't even name a lot of them. I follow loads of them, but I feel like there's a growing movement of smaller artists and smaller businesses who are just creating the most incredible art as well, which is just amazing to see. It's not all about galleries and exhibitions anymore. There's so many ways to get your art and your message out there, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, and actually, you're on Instagram as well, and your work sends some really powerful messages, I think. And so kind of with that, what role do you think art can play in tackling social issues like improving women's safety in public spaces, for example?
I think it's a really good question, actually, because I think people often see art as something that's like a nice to have, right? Like it's a nice thing, it's a nice luxury, it's a nice extra. Whereas actually, I think throughout history, art has shown it has the power to make change happen. And I personally think one of the first ways it can do that is just by bringing the topic into the public domain and just sparking a conversation. Because if you're not talking about something, how does anyone know it's important? How does anyone know what's going on? I think that is number one. I think also there's a lot of incredible women artists out there. There are a lot of like collective artist movements that are all women, and they are painting a lot of art that is about these issues that are so important to all of us. So I think that is also amazing. But I think, honestly, a lot of it is just having the conversations. And I think definitely over the past few years, I've realized how little we've had those conversations. And I think a lot has happened. I think most notably probably was the death of Sarah Everard. I feel like when that happened, for the first time ever, I had conversations with really good male friends of mine about how I felt walking the streets. And for a lot of them, it blew their minds that when women walk around on the street, we do all these little things that are so instinctive. We've never even told anybody about them.
Yeah.
We put our headphones on, but the music's not on, or we have our keys in our hands, or if we see a guy coming, we'll cross the street, or we'll walk whichever way is kind of the most busy to get home. And all these people I was talking to, I mean, I know I'm biased because they're my friends, but these were decent men, they're like good men who I would like to think, if something was happening on the street or a woman was being heckled or in an uncomfortable position, I would like to think they would speak out. And yet they had no idea that not only me, but every woman they know takes these steps to just feel a bit safer on the way home. It blew their mind. So I think sometimes we really underestimate the power of just having those conversations, because I really feel like now I've had those conversations with them, they will be a little bit more aware and they will be looking out for, is there a woman late at night who's looking a bit uncomfortable? Is there something that I can do to make her more comfortable? And it's not that they wouldn't have done it before. They just didn't have the awareness. They just didn't know. That's what we did, So
yeah, for sure.
I think that is where art steps in. And I think there's been a lot of really cool street art that's brought awareness to all of those issues. We could do with some in Sydenham, actually, couldn't we? Maybe that's like the next project. Like, we need a big piece of street art that addresses women's safety in some way, just to get everybody talking about it. But I think that's the key, is just everybody needs to talk, and not just women, but men too.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting hearing you say that, because I've definitely had those similar conversations where, you know, a close friend of mine who he was like, I've never heard a woman be heckled on the streets. I've just never heard it. And I was like, I guess you wouldn't, mate, because it's not going to be aimed at you necessarily. And totally, he's the kind of person who would definitely step in and say something, but it's like the fact that he's never experienced that or even witnessed it at all. Something that's very usual for women, because it starts quite young often. So you 100%. Kind of, it just becomes a part of your life, really, I guess.
So used to it. I think the first memory I have is probably, I'm not even kidding, Angela, I think I was probably about 8 or 9. And I remember dreading walking past a builder, like a building site or anywhere where there were construction workers, because you would just brace yourself for whatever. You knew there was going to be something. You didn't know kind of how aggressive it would be, but you knew there was going to be something. And I remember being that young and being like, I don't want to walk past that building site or crossing the road to avoid it. And even then you can always avoid it. So that's like how many years? Like almost 30 years of conditioning to just protect yourselves on the street from men. So I think even for us, it's so deeply ingrained. I mean, like I call my husband every time I leave the train station at Sydenham, if it's really late at night. And I think he knew on some level why I did it, but even he didn't know that I do all these other things to just feel a little bit safer on the way home. And that's my husband. I talk to him about everything. So I think from both sides, that conversation just needs to happen a lot more openly and frequently, and in a lot more different forums as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so as a Sydenham local, what would you say are some of the sort of main concerns around women's safety in Sydenham? And is there anything that particular or specific that we could be addressing to make women safer? So I suppose there's conversation, that's really good. And then you said about maybe a massive piece of street art, that's a good one as well. Is there kind of anything else that you think we need to be doing?
I mean, I don't think Sydenham is that different really to a lot of places. I think the concerns are probably the same. Obviously, they're slightly different for a city compared to somewhere that's a little bit more quiet. I think one thing Sydenham is really good at, like a lot of Lewisham actually, is having a sense of community. So I wonder if there's something around, I don't know, just something around, like when you're walking along the high street, if you don't feel safe, can you just pop into the fried chicken shop, you pop into the Morley's and just say, I just feel a little bit unsafe, or there's a guy who's heckling, so I've just come in. But they know that they are a safe space for women. So you have a lot of these really cool phone lines now, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard of, it's got Strut in it, Strut Safe, or something similar, or Street Strut, or something, I can't remember what it's called.
Okay.
But it's a helpline that's manned by female volunteers, and any woman who's walking home and feels worried can call this helpline and just have somebody on the other end of the phone until they get back home. And I wonder if there's some way to implement that on a local level, not necessarily a phone call, but there's so many places that are open late at night when you would be walking home, and just to maybe, I don't know, make those a safe space somehow where you can pop in if you're not feeling 100% safe. Yeah, it's a big question though. That's a really big question.
It is a big question, yeah. But I think definitely things happening on a community level is really important for sure. And that's like knowing each other. That's something that's really important. And so definitely being able to go into places is a really good idea, because at least you have like these safe spaces. Yeah. Do you think there's anything we could do in terms of incorporating art and creativity to kind of strengthen these issues within the local community?
I think something like that workshop was really good, because it got local women with actually very different perspectives on street safety talking about it. And there was actually one woman who attended that workshop who said, well, I'm not scared when I'm walking the street. And all of us were really taken aback. And she said, this is my home. This is my territory. I refuse to be scared when I'm walking home. So I think even hearing perspectives like that is really inspiring, because it really made me think, actually, that's a really good point. Maybe I should channel a little bit of that and just kind of try to be a little bit braver when I'm walking home. I think workshops like that are really good. I think school workshops would be amazing. So I think also, because it's quite a heavy topic, I think art is a really great way to bring a bit of peace and possibly even a little bit of humor and a bit of creativity and a different channel through which to have that conversation. Because I think sometimes sitting down and just discussing it is a lot. Whereas I think being able to express it by painting something or drawing something or acting something out, I think makes it feel a little less intense. And would be a really good way, I think, to do it with like the younger community in Sydenham. And also that way you're talking to these kids at a really young age. So you are talking to young women and girls about what is okay and what is not okay. And actually, if you're feeling uncomfortable on the streets, that's not okay. You are allowed to do something about that and speak up about that. But you're also teaching young men and boys, it's also your responsibility. Like, this is your community. It is your responsibility to make your friends and your sisters and your mum and whoever feel safe on your streets. Like, don't you also want that for your community? So I think that would be another great way to use those kind of creative activities to help the conversation with all age groups. But I think with like schools, that could work really, really well.
Yeah, I agree. I think like you learn, so it's so important, those like, even like primary school particularly, like those formative years, that's when you really are sort of absorbing, isn't it? And it's so important to give children and young people a space to kind of process everything and talk about stuff. The workshop that you were referring to, that's the workshop that you ran for Sydenham Arts, is that right?
Yes.
And do you mind just telling us a little bit about that?
So we had a workshop where we had some local women pop in, and we did a bit of a presentation on kind of some background context of women's safety. So honestly, some quite worrying statistics. And then we had a kind of broader discussion around how we feel as women on the streets, like what makes us feel worried or what makes us feel safe. And then we did an activity where we closed our eyes and we imagined walking home late at night and the things that might worry us, and picturing what would make us feel safer. And after we had thought about that for a little while, we painted what we saw. And we had a set of paints, and every single person in the room said, I'm not an artist, I don't know what to paint, I'm not creative. And by the end of it, they had all produced these beautiful pieces of art. And I think it was so nice to be able to talk about something that is actually really difficult. There's been some horrendous stuff in the news around women's safety. It's really important, but it's not a positive topic particularly to talk about. So I think to be able to turn that into something actually quite empowering, and at the end of it, you've created a beautiful piece of art about what makes you feel empowered on the streets, was a really good way to turn the conversation around. And I think that's one of the things that art can do, in a way that talking about something, just you can't do it in the same way.
Yeah, often it's so hard to find the words for things, isn't it, to kind of conceptualize, because it's so much, it's like thoughts and emotions and everything to put it into words. So you need other avenues. I think that sometimes it's amazing how you can have a picture that can just totally express exactly what you haven't been able to say. It's definitely powerful. So we also did a survey, and something that came up was that a lot of the abuse is coming through staring and sort of verbal abuse. You might not know, but why, do you have any ideas why this is so prevalent, or any kind of thoughts on what we could do to try and, raise awareness about it and prevent it from happening?
I think, and I'm definitely not an expert, but I think it probably happens because a lot of men don't think it's that serious, and they don't think there's any harm in doing it. And I think they think it's harmless. I think probably the men who do it have been brought up to think they have a God-given right to behave however they want on the streets, even if it makes a woman feel uncomfortable. That possibly is a bit of a generalization. But when I think of the men in my life, I know none of them would do that. So I'm like, well, there's a lot of men who don't do that. So what is going wrong here? But honestly, I think it's probably, they don't think it's that serious. Maybe they think it should be taken as a compliment. Maybe they get off on the power of it as well. You know, particularly late at night, you know, a woman is going to be freaked out if you're staring at her, or if maybe you don't understand consent. Maybe you don't understand boundaries. Maybe you just think this is a great way to pick up a woman. Maybe it's worked for you once out of 1,000 times, so you keep doing it. But again, I think the way to change that is, it's definitely awareness, I think, for all men. But I do think there's a lot of work, like we were saying earlier, with younger people, because I think it's really hard to unlearn a lot of that conditioning. And if I'm being honest, this is going off at a bit of a tangent, but I think a lot of it is also around toxic masculinity. I think there are a lot of men who have been brought up to believe you have to behave a certain way to be a real man. And that kind of conditioning, I don't even know how you begin to undo it. I think it's easiest to start with the next generation, right? To start with a clean slate. Not that you can't unlearn it, but you know, I feel like all of that staring and stuff, like I don't feel like it's as prevalent as it was, for example, in the 80s when I was growing up. So something is obviously changing. Something is obviously getting better. And again, I think it's raising awareness. It would be really interesting to know of those men who behave in that way, if you were to have a conversation with them around how do you think it makes a woman feel, it would be really interesting to know what they say, because I wonder how many of them have even stopped to think about
or
that.
Even aware, maybe. You know, definitely that's good. Maybe that's the next survey from the other side.
That would be great. I think that would be so cool. Although how you'd find the participants, I don't know.
That's true.
You'd have to go around heckling the people who are heckling the women on the street to track them down, which would be difficult. That would be so interesting, actually, I think, the flip side of it, because I think I'm being a little bit mean, I think, in kind of how I'm describing these people. But actually, I think we'd probably be quite surprised by what they have to say. And I think a lot of it would probably be lack of awareness. I think the percentage who are actively trying to make a woman uncomfortable is, I'm an eternal optimist, but I'd like to think probably very small. And a lot of it is just lack of awareness, just not thinking, not being considerate. And like you were saying, like, you know, our really good male friends who have no idea what it's like to be in our shoes, I'm sure they're exactly the same. They just have not given any thought to how does it feel. And it might not even cross their mind that actually sometimes for women it is really terrifying to have somebody stare at you. You might not think you're doing anything, but you have no idea what is going through her mind as she's walking home, particularly if you start kind of loitering and walking along next to her. It's terrifying. Like, we've all had that happen to us. And none of us think, oh, it's fine, it's just a bit of a laugh. Like, you're terrified on some spectrum, but you are always really afraid, right? And I wonder how many of them realise that.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting question, actually. Something to be explored, maybe. Okay, so we love Lewisham here at Sydenham Arts, and we love Sydenham. And if you had to pick one place or one thing that you love the most about Lewisham, what would it be?
Angela, I can't pick just one thing. That's just not possible. Before I moved to Southeast London, people from Southeast London used to really annoy me, because they would all say, oh, it's so green and there's such a sense of community and everyone's so friendly. I've now become that person. I try to persuade people to move here. I think definitely the green is spot on. I think we have so many beautiful parks, and as someone with 2 kids and a dog, I'm very grateful for all these lovely parks we have near us. I think the sense of community, because it's the first part of London I've lived in where I feel that. And I think the diversity, because that is really different to how I grew up in 1980s Kent. Very, very different. And I think to see how my kids are growing up with other kids from all walks of life, you can buy all different kinds of food in the shops, you hear all these different languages as you're walking around the streets. I think it's it's not necessarily specific to Lewisham. I think it's a very London thing as well, but I think Lewisham does it very, very well.
Yeah, we're lucky. We are lucky, definitely.
For sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been so good to speak to you, Henna. It's been really lovely. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Next, I'm speaking with local Labour MP for Lewisham West and Penge, Ellie Reeves. We'll be chatting about her work on ending violence against women and girls and the role she thinks the arts has to play in all of this. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you today.
Thank you. So to kick us off, first of all, could you tell us a bit about yourself and some of the work you've done around justice and campaigning for improving women's safety and preventing violence against women and girls?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm the Member of Parliament for Lewisham West and Penge, which is obviously the area that covers Sydenham. I was first elected to Parliament 6 years ago, so I've been the MP since 2017, and I grew up locally. I live locally now. Lewisham West and Penge is very much my home and always has been. So it's fantastic getting to represent my local area in Parliament, and it's certainly been a challenging 6 years since I've been in Parliament. As well as representing people locally, I'm also a shadow justice minister, and it's through that role that I have led on a lot of Labour's work on ending violence against women and girls. When I was appointed to Labour's front bench in April, knew that I wanted to make ending violence against women and girls at the centre of the work that I did. Just because I just think so much needs to change in this area. We've got a situation where only 1.6% of reported rapes result in a charge or summons. So that means for every 100 rapes that are reported, and these are rapes that are reported, there'll be others that aren't reported, but for every 100 that are reported, less than 2 result in anyone ever being charged for that. That's just completely unacceptable. Where someone is charged, we often see court delays, for example, of 3 years. So people waiting 3 years before their case ever gets to court. When I speak to survivors, victims, they say, you can't move on with their life during that period. They feel like they're just stuck in a, perpetual place of trauma. And all the while, a lot of the messaging has always been about women needing to change their behaviour in certain areas, be thinking about what they wear. I mean, why should we have to change our behaviour? Actually, it's men that need to change their behaviour. And really, I just wanted to do something about all of this. So in my role, one of the things that I did was work on a white paper, a kind of policy document setting in government to end violence against women and girls, to tackle these issues. And there are a number of things that I have said that I've been really clear about. The first is prosecution service have proper specialist units to deal with rape, sexual violence and domestic abuse, so that these aren't sort of overlooked as issues. One of the other things that I've said is that we would set up specialist rape courts. So specialist rape courts fast tracking rape cases through the system so they get heard fast. Also providing victims with legal advocates. So they've got someone explaining their rights to them, bringing up standards in the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, and having someone there do every step of the way. I mean, those are just 3 measures. There are more, but those are just 3 measures that would make a huge difference to a lot of women.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's difficult, isn't it? People don't always know where they can even go in those situations, so even knowing that there is a like you say, like a specialist rape court, that could be life-changing for a lot of people, knowing that there is somewhere you can go where people deal with that as a specific. As you said, you've been the MP for Lewisham West and Penge since 2017, so over 6 years now. And so is there anything that you would say has been particularly challenging over those 6 years, or something that you think still needs to change? And do you have a kind of specific example of that?
I mean, look, I think there's a lot that needs to change. When we think about ending violence against women and girls, during the past 6 years, there's been various announcements by the government, but it all just seems really piecemeal. So one of the reasons that I really wanted to drive this forward is that the government, recognised that there was a problem with rape prosecutions, and they apologised for getting it so wrong. That figure I talked about, less than 2 in 100 reported rapes resulting in a charge and a summons. But the government said, yes, we know this is terrible and we apologise. And then you would think you would get some change flowing from that, but actually very little has happened. To start with, it took the government 2 years to do a review into what had gone wrong. And then when they published the review, actually there wasn't much in it in terms of policy proposals to change thing. And that's really frustrating. And being in opposition can be frustrating because actually, you can identify specialist rape courts would speed up the system. Legal advocates would give people that support that they need. Putting domestic abuse call handlers into every 999 control room in the police would mean that people would get that support when they phone up at the first point of contact. These are really kind of almost common sense examples, but actually one of the frustrations of being a member of parliament in opposition is that you can't get those policies over the line because you haven't got the votes in parliament to get you to that place, and that's incredibly frustrating. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges of the last 6 years, that frustration around not being able to get those things done that we can see would make that huge difference.
So something that we're really interested in is kind of what we can do from a community perspective. And so, for everyday people, without changing laws or policing, how can our everyday actions have a positive impact on reducing violence, and then, ensuring it's dealt with properly, and then if something does happen, making sure that victims feel supported, things like that.
Yeah. I think that's a really, really important, point. About what could we do as a community, and I love our community here in Sydenham. It's where I grew up. It's home, but there are things like, women sort of being expected to change their behaviour. I can remember when I was growing up in Sydenham, and my walk home from the station was really quick if I could walk through Mayo Park, but really long if I had to go all the way around the high street and back round. But I wouldn't walk through the park if it was dark because I wouldn't feel safe. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So my journey home would be a lot longer. My journey to and from school, I'd walk to school, would involve going down a sort of an alleyway, which I would only do at certain times of the day. I wouldn't do it at other times. And one of the things is that, we sort of have to change our behaviour. As women, we feel as though, we have to change our behaviour. We walk home with, our keys in our hands, ready to use. We speed up if we hear those footsteps behind us. We change our routes to make our journeys, that much longer, so that we feel safer. It shouldn't have to be like that. We should be able to go about our normal everyday life without having to make those adjustments. And I think, a lot of that is about awareness. And I think that's why the SmArt project is so important, because it is about raising that awareness and making sort of people feel as though they can be safer in their communities. But also, I think there needs to be sort of that re-education, that shift in focus from women being expected to change their behaviour, and actually it's men that need to change their behaviour. It's not us. We should be able to walk home, the route that's the quickest route without feeling that that's unsafe. So, as a community, I think there is more that can be done around raising awareness. And it's only recently that you started to see kind of things like signs on the tubes, telling men, not to, behave in a kind of, in a violent and abusive way. Whereas a few years back, it was all about sort of, telling women not to drink too much and things like that. And it's just, I just think as a society, as a community, we should sort of stand firm that it's not women that need to change their behaviour.
So, talking about Street Smart, do you think that the arts and creativity can play a positive role in addressing social issues? And if so, do you have any ideas about how they could do this?
I think they do have a role, and I think things like Street Smart are really important. As a society, I think it's really important to understand that people can also then enjoy the art, and it helps us, doesn't it, sometimes to think about things in different ways as well, and just to think about things a little bit differently. Art can grab your attention, can't it, in a way that other messaging sometimes doesn't. It can sort of capture the imagination. It can make people sort of stop and think, all right, okay, that's really interesting. That's not something that I've not thought about something in that way before. And it'd be really interesting to see how street SmArt develops in that way. But I really think there's an important role for the arts in all of this. And actually, the arts can have a really powerful role in tackling ending violence against women and girls. We've seen that, for example, in the recent play that Jodie Comer was in, Prima Facie, which was about rape and the narratives around rape. And I've got a constituent locally who's a filmmaker. And he recently made a documentary film for Channel 4 around a young woman called Angela Eyton, who was in a coercive and controlling relationship with a man, which ultimately led to her suffering catastrophic injuries and brain damage. And a local resident made this Channel 4 documentary about it. It was really, really powerful. And again, I think that's an example of how the arts can make us think about things and stop and take notice. So definitely, I think the arts have got a really important role to play in all of this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, sometimes I think we don't always have the vocabulary or way of explaining something, and then sometimes if you watch something or you see something, it kind of gives you access to that vocabulary.
That's right. I think that's right. It can just be a very, very powerful way to portray something, can't it? Very, very impactful.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, you obviously love Lewisham. We love Lewisham as well. And so we were wondering if you had to pick one thing or place that you love the most about Lewisham, what would it be?
Do you know, for me, I think I'd say the Horniman's Museum, which is in my constituency. It's a brilliant museum, and we've been talking today about the arts, and that is a place that is so rich in the arts, in culture. And I can remember going to the Horniman's Museum when I was a little girl, and now I take my own children there. They have fantastic exhibitions which are always changing, and again, they often have things that really make you stop and think about different issues. And again, it's such a wonderful place and a wonderful celebration of the arts. So that's my number one favourite place. But one of the things that I'm really proud about for Lewisham is our brilliant green spaces and our parks. And my constituency, we've got Mayo Park, Beckenham Place Park, Wells Park. We've got some brilliant parks, and I think particularly, sometimes we sort of take those things for granted. And then, when the pandemic hit, I think those parks were just such a lifeline for so many people who, enjoyed them in a way that they hadn't done so for years. So, our green spaces are so important. And that's something I think our borough does really well with. But that links back to the points I said earlier, though, about kind of, as women, avoiding parks at certain times, for example, if it's dark, not walking through the park. And actually, we shouldn't have those restrictions on us. We should feel safe in the, when we go out in parks. And I was sort of been thinking about this recently, and sort of looking at ways that people can feel safe. And I know that the mayor in West Yorkshire, Tracy Braden, has done quite a lot of work about making sure women can access parks without feeling concerned. And I think that's really, really important. So making sure that we're not fearful of going to the park because, the sun might be setting, it might be getting dark, or, there are tall bushes that people might be lurking in, or the facilities just, don't make it a particularly pleasant experience. So, I think it's really, really important that we make sure that they are accessible.
Yes, 100%. I love the parks here as well. So yeah. Definitely. Oh, well, thank you, Ellie. That's been really great, and just really lovely to hear kind of about the work you're doing, and how you feel about Lewisham and the surrounding area and everything. So that's great. And I know I've got you for a few more minutes, so I'm curious, have you seen anything over the last 6 years that you do think has changed, and that you are happy to have seen changed regarding violence against women and girls?
I I think we talk about it a lot more now. I think it has moved up the agenda, and sometimes it can be a bit uncomfortable for people talking about it. But I don't think it should be, we talk about it when there's a murder that makes the headlines. We should be talking about it all of the time and calling it out and making it clear that it will not be tolerated in society. We had the Me Too movement. That's how we get change. If we stay quiet about it, if we continue to let sort of misogyny prevail, if we continue to to think, well, this is just something that happens, we have to accept it, then things will never change. So actually, I do think in the last 6 years, there is so much more has been said about ending violence against women and girls. It has moved up the political agenda. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has made it, one of his missions to tackle ending violence against women and girls. And I think that sends a really powerful and important message.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been really, really lovely talking to you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. No, much appreciated. No, all right. Thank you.
All right, brilliant. Bye.
And our final guest is local business owner Jack Duddy from Leo Cafe. We'll be talking about making spaces feel safer and the role local businesses can play in all of this. We'll also be discussing all the exciting things that they've got going on at Leo. Hello, Jack. How are you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure. You're a relatively new business owner or in Sydenham anyway, and it's really great to kind of have you here on the high street. So could you tell us a bit about you and Leo Cafe and what's brought you to Sydenham, really?
Yeah, my name's Jack. I'm new to Sydenham, but I've been running Leo for about 7 years on different platforms. There's more of my background. I've got more of a care background. A funny relationship with food when I was younger, but dived into it via some volunteer work whilst I was away and just found a real love for it and found a real love for hosting and cooking food, and I just started feeling really comfortable in that environment. So I started something when I came back, travelling and just hosting evenings where we were getting people together, sharing food, and we started like that basically. And then over the years it just kind of developed. In lockdown, I feel like that's probably where we found our bit of a shame it was in that period, but I think for a lot of businesses, especially small businesses, it kind of put people in different directions and people found like a different route of what they were doing, and we started doing deliveries, and it was just kind of more by chance, and I was just wanting to cook some food for some people, and it ended up me cooking food every Friday night at curry and sending it out to various locations, houses in South East London. Had a couple of drivers with good friends, and it was just beautiful, and I still remember those days now, and I remember all the names of book the deliveries, and they still come into the cafe now. So it's like from there, it's like such a special moment where we kind of like Leo kind of started getting a little bit more well known in South East London. So yeah, that was a beautiful part of our business. And then after lockdown, we started doing catering. We've been doing weddings, parties, all types of different events. Alongside that, I was working as a head chef at Brown and Green. Learned lots there, lots of skills of running a cafe and just generally being in that environment, which has helped me a lot. But yeah, as the company kind of started getting a bit bigger and a little bit more well known, I've just always wanted my own space to host my events and just bring a nice little community together. And so yeah, back in October last year, took a little bit of time off just to kind of like reassess what I want to do with Leo and just take some time. And yeah, been walking past Dragonfly Yoga Studio for some months, and I could see the cafe space empty, and I was like, that just looks like a nice, beautiful space that just needs a bit of life, a bit of love, and a bit of like some I don't know, just some love injected into it. And it was just a beautiful space, which I'm actually sitting in now, that can hosting the events I've been putting on. So yeah, got chatting to the owners here, Mark and Veronica, and yeah, we started a little residency and a little collaboration. So I've been here since January 3rd. I'm sorry where I got brought up there, but I've been living in South East London for about 7 years, in and out.
Oh yeah.
Sydenham, I just feel at home at. There's something about it, and there's something about South East London in particular that I feel comfortable in. I like the community. I love the kind of like the familiarity. Especially working in Crystal Palace, I realise that there's just like people everyone's doing bits, everyone's like doing their own thing and like working 9 to 5, but also have their like school at the weekend. And I kind of love that atmosphere. So that's what brings me back to Sydenham, and yeah, that's what I love about it.
I think that's it. Like, a lot of people say that, and I feel that too. It's a place where there is such a community, and it's like you feel that. And I think humans crave community. It's a part of us, really. It's how we've survived over the like thousands of years. It's what kind of makes us. So I think it is special for that reason.
And I think it's particularly special in the South East London area. I mean, no disrespect to where I grew up, I loved it, and it was a nice environment, but there wasn't that community spirit. It was a lot more suburban. Whereas this place has a lot more going on, and if I can bring an example of some days where, I mean, running a business is really lovely, and I love doing my own thing, but there are some days where you're like, I'm alone and this is scary. And then you get it will just be those moments where someone will just come in, and we met through me running Leo, whether it's someone who booked my deliveries and we get to meet each other face to face, or whether it's just someone who just comes in and just enjoys the space. And it's like, those are the moments I'm just like, I love this community, man. And it's everyone wants to get involved, and it's like, I mean, I can chat about it a little bit more later when I talk about my events, but there's some people I've just met through just doing this, and I've become really good friends with them. So that just travels a long way for me. And these people that I'm meeting, I just want to help out the cafe. I had a guy yesterday who I met through an event I'd done here. He came and picked my door yesterday, just out of a bit of time, and it's just little bits like that just realise that take me out of that little lonely mindset I have sometimes when everything is getting a little bit heavy. That community side of it, it keeps me going. That's why I'm here at the moment. So I love it, man.
And it's important to people, like you were saying about people that are coming back to you, that it had food from you during lockdown. It's like, that's because that was important to them as well at that stage, you know.
Yeah, it means so much to me. Those customers in particular, I'm like, there's always a nice, it's nice to meet someone face to face. Like, lockdown was very difficult in that aspect. These were just like a list of names that I sent food to, and would now and then get a message saying how lovely it was. But to meet someone face to face, it obviously travels a lot further. And that's what I love about having my own spaces, that I meet these people face to face every day now. And I'm my best self here. So it's kind of down to that community that I owe that to. So I'm very appreciative of our community.
And you were saying about the events. You've got the events that you run at Leo and things like that. Could you tell us a bit more about those?
Of course. I mean, I started with events, and this is something that I love. I love those, I love Cafe Day, and I love the sort of fluidness to that, but the events, there's an intensity to it that I really enjoy, that brings everyone together on those nights. So I've got 3 going at the moment, and they're all kind of interconnected. So 4 years ago, I lost my best friend, who took his own life. So this is something that I was still trying to put my events on around that time, but there was a lack of I don't know, it was making me, I was putting the events on, and then the next day feeling really deflated because it was putting so much energy into something, and then still trying to grieve, and it was a difficult time. So I wanted to have a space where I could put these events on consistently and bring more people in to kind of help out with that and create that little community. So I started with our Leo and Friends event, which is a live music and poetry night and curry night. So the concept is, so the first one I put on, it was through grief. I was grieving my friend Adam, putting these events on, celebrating him. And then I just had this kind of epiphany the next day after one where I was feeling quite low. I was like, I want to celebrate my mates that are around me right now. And I feel like we kind of had this disconnect of appreciating our friends and the people around us until something bad does happen, or you love your friends and stuff like that. But really appreciating them and telling them and complimenting them is kind of falling short a little bit, I feel. But so I want to put this night on. It was a supper club like we would do, but we also had performers. So I had a friend of mine who was a stand-up comic, had a friend of mine who was in a band called Illa Joy, and they performed, spoken word artists, collaboration of my friends performing just to celebrate them. And I did a little talk about each one of them, told them how much I loved them, and it was just beautiful. And it developed from there. And now we've got this night that's happening every last Saturday of the month called Leo and Friends, which is now just opening up to this community. The night is all about celebrating the performers and appreciating people in the room. So for me, that night is very special, and it is kind of a bit of a legacy of my friend Adam. So we have that. Then we have Grief Club. So this is something I knew I wanted to host when I opened this space. And the importance of it is just sort of getting people together, all suffering with something that we've gone through, which is a tricky subject to talk about anyway. but I've introduced the element of food. So I cook everyone dinner. We have a nice, like my supper club. It always just, I feel like the food is a connection that we can, when people are sharing food, it kind of lightens any subject. It lightens any kind of atmosphere. So yeah, we have a little supper club and 8 or 9, 10 people sitting around a table talking about grief. And they've been going really well. We've got a nice little sort of community from that. Like, we've got some people coming back every month, and each month we have 1 or 2 new people. And I think people kind of maybe a little bit apprehensive when they come in, but by the end of it, you've forgotten it's grief club. We're talking about something else, and we're just sort of all like connecting on different levels because it's a safe space. So we've all gone through something, but we're all sort of here being able to tell our story. And from connecting a little group like that, one person can take something from one other person about like whether it's a coping mechanism or a way they've dealt with grief. I think that's brilliant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're coming every month and you're just someone said something in the way they've dealt with their grief, and you're taking a little bit from that, I just think that can be really special. So that's something that's connected with Leo Friends. And then we have Say It Out Loud, which is a group of fathers. It's hosted by my friend Danny, who also has a fitness out, or is this like a, I don't know, is this an advert? I don't know. I mean, he's got a personal training company called Bird Eye Fitness. He's a beautiful and he hosts the evening and I cook the food, and we just talk about issues that are relating around being a father and insecurities we have and little techniques, and just, yeah, it's a very beautiful evening where it was very safe. And I join that group and talk about feelings I have about surrounding being a dad, and yeah, it feels lovely. And the reason why I feel like they're all connected is losing a friend in that way. There's sort of the connection of men not talking, grief itself, and then celebrating our friends. So I love the fact that there's this like kind of like little bubble that brings all these people together, and all these people come to these groups, are coming to all the events, and it's just bringing people in month by month. So yeah, they're the events we're hosting at the moment.
That's great. And it feels like you're creating a lot of spaces for people to feel like they're not alone, really, because that's also such a big part of it, isn't it, really? Because there's certain stuff that we don't talk about, but actually so many of us experience, and it's like really common shared emotions, but we are sort of taught not to share them, or not to ask about them. So
not to feel like you're a burden or anything like that, which is definitely quite evident in the group, and we speak about it a lot. And like one example I can think of is that if we look at the first 4 or 5 group clubs, it was actually only women coming. You know, we look at Say It Out Loud. I think one event it was just me, Danny, and another guy. So it's such a, you can really see the evidence of the contrast of what each group is like. So it's like,
that's interesting.
It's very transparent. So so yeah, but they've been going well, and like I said, it's what's keeping me going here. And
yeah, that's great. And so we've kind of been talking about how in some ways local cafes and bars and places are like the kind of the eyes and the ears of the community. I mean, because you see a lot of people every day. So how do you think local businesses might play a part in supporting women, making them feel safer and more supported in sort of preventing abuse? Yeah,
I guess, I mean, this is something I've been thinking about since we started discussing about doing this podcast. Like, I mean, for me, very much a white man living in Sydenham. For me, there's issues that I've not had to deal with or not had to experience. So I've had to really channel some different avenues and think about what it is, what my responsibility is as a business. And it is, for me, just about creating familiarity. And when we're starting this business and I've started opening this space, I'm thinking also much about the food and how delicious that has to be and how delicious the coffee has to be. But more importantly, like how important the space is for the people coming to it, and especially the women, and make sure that this space is safe and that we're putting on things here that are inclusive to that. And most importantly, for me, when I started hiring my staff, it's just not hiring through experience, but hiring through like personality and through their energy, and making sure that they've got empathy, and whether or not they can cook scrambled eggs, I'd much rather than be able to make their space feel a lot safer and the energy feel calmer and a little bit, more open. So yeah, I guess it's, for my responsibility, just having the space and making sure that it does feel safe and that we are a well-lit area. There's familiarity here. And yeah, it's a nice space. If you need a space to come talk to you on here, then we're here.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you're doing a lot to create that space already, really, with everything that you're doing.
So it always feels like you could be doing more. So like, there's definitely where I've been putting these events on. I'm definitely sort of like want to source out some more sort of talk groups, especially for women. So I'm looking for people to use this space as a platform, whether they want to put talks on or anything that can kind of open this space up, and that people see us collaborating with different groups, and it just to open up a little bit more. So that's kind of where we're trying to go to at the moment. Okay,
that's good. That's interesting. I feel like you're on the right platform to be telling people that as well right now.
Yeah. Man, if it's not on, please let me know. I want as many people to get involved in this platform as possible. Yeah,
that's amazing. And Street SmArt, which is the initiative that this podcast is a part of, and as you know, so it's about using creative thinking and the arts to kind of open up conversations mainly around women's safety in public spaces. Do you think that the arts and creativity can play a positive role in addressing social issues? And if so, how?
Yes. I mean, just through where I communicate by talking. Whereas I feel like hosting certain talk groups, I've noticed that's not generally always someone sort of go to express themselves. So yeah, of course, but I feel like through the arts, it's a different way to express yourself. Maybe a little bit more emotionally, slightly more safer. It doesn't feel as heavy as saying something out loud. Whereas we've got different sort of art groups going on here, or different projects going on. I feel like it's just another way to express yourself. So yeah, I feel like that would probably be, an alternative. If you were to stop talking about the experience you've had, to do it through art. So I feel like, it would work.
Yeah. So many different personalities. I think I've definitely had to learn that. Yeah, especially like you say, if you're a talker, actually sometimes things are really difficult to talk about. So, but you can express it in a picture or kind of.
I mean, I feel like I am quite good at talking, but sometimes it takes me about 3 weeks to process an emotion. Might be a little bit quicker through art. So it's just maybe finding what's for you. So yeah.
Yeah. And you've already talked a little bit about the love for Sydenham, the love for Lewisham. But we also love Lewisham, love Sydenham. And so if you had to pick one place or one thing that you love the most about Lewisham, what would it be?
Okay, just one.
Just one.
Okay, I've got one thing in mind, but I can't really elaborate. Just one. All right. Okay.
You can go. We'll allow it. You can elaborate a bit.
I'm going to bring them together. So, we've spoken about it already. The community here is, I'm sure there's beautiful communities all over England, but here for me, I feel very much at home. They've made me feel very welcome. There's so much support, especially from yourself, Sydenham Arts, and other little community groups that just kind of want to see what's going on here, and just they've been so supportive of small businesses. So I really noticed amongst South East London, it's a massive thing. Like, they all look out for each other. We all support each other down the high street. We're all buying each other's food and coffee and chatting and just generally getting to know each other. So for me, it is the community and One Tree Hill. Love One Tree Hill, man.
That is Lewisham, isn't it?
Yeah. That is Lewisham. Yeah.
Beautiful place. So if you want to visit Lewisham, come by the cafe and then take a little walk up to One Tree Hill.
Oh, yeah, just for the view, have a little...
Incredible. Yeah, we're very lucky.
Yeah, we are lucky. We're really lucky. Well, that's really great, and it's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you for giving us your time and your energy and telling us all about Leo. And
thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Yeah, no problem. And see you soon, no doubt.
Good, thank you. Take care, yeah?
And you.
Bye.
All right, well, thanks for listening. A big thanks to all of our guests, Henna Bakhshi, Ellie Reeves and Jack Duddy. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from, and head over to the Sydenham Arts website for more information about Street SmArt and all the other exciting things from Sydenham Arts. Bye!